Years had passed, and the sharpest edges of grief had softened into a dull, constant ache for Amy. The ranch, ever resilient, had carried on, its rhythms a soothing balm on a wound that would never truly close. But one sun drenched afternoon, the familiar tranquility was broken. It started with Lindy perched on the top rail of the paddock fence, her small legs swinging. Her laughter, usually a bright melody, was hushed. Her gaze was fixed on the far ridge, where a lone figure stood against the vast blue sky. It was a horse, a powerful black stallion, wild and magnificent. He stood as still as a statue, his silhouette a stark, breathtaking image. Amy came out of the barn, wiping dust from her hands onto her jeans. She saw where Lindy was looking, and her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just any horse. The set of his head, the proud arch of his neck, the way he stood his ground as if claiming the very land he surveyed. It was achingly familiar. Amy's heart began a frantic, painful rhythm against her ribs. She couldn't move, couldn't think. Her mind flashed back through the years to another wild horse, a horse that had mirrored the troubled spirit of a young man she had come to love. Amy's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Her heart throbbed with a mix of wonder and sharp, sudden pain. She had dreamt of moments like this, of signs and whispers from the past, but the reality was overwhelming. It felt too real, a waking dream she couldn't escape. Her instincts screamed at her to get closer to see if her eyes were deceiving her, but her boots felt rooted to the spot. Her body refused to obey the desperate command of her heart. "Is he real?" she murmured to herself, a question directed at the universe. "Please tell me he's real." And then, as if hearing her, the stallion tossed his head and let out a long, resonant call that echoed across the valley. It was a sound Amy knew in her soul, a sound she had memorized years ago. Amy's hand flew to her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. Lindy, fearless and curious, slipped off the fence. "I think he's looking for something," she said, her eyes still on the horse. Without another word, she began to walk slowly, deliberately, towards the ridge. Amy gasped, a surge of fear and hope warring within her. "Lindy, wait, wait!" But her daughter kept going, drawn by an invisible thread. Amy forced her own legs to move, the ground feeling unsteady beneath her. Her tears were falling freely now, hot and fast against her cold skin. "Mom, he's sad," Lindy called back. "I can feel it." Amy finally reached her, grabbing her small hand. She looked from her daughter's earnest face to the stallion's dark, intelligent eyes. He was watching them, no longer a distant figure, but a living, breathing presence. "Lindy," she whispered, her voice trembling, "how do you know that?" And in that quiet moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Nothing else mattered, just the two of them and the mysterious visitor on the hill. Was it a miracle, a memory brought to life, or something else entirely? No one could say, not yet, but one thing was certain. Amy's heart, shuttered for so long, had just been thrown wide open. Something deep inside her had been awakened, something that had been still since the day Ty died. This was not the start of answers. This was the start of 1,000 new questions, and Amy was finally ready to ask them. Amy stood frozen, her hand clutching Lindy's as her daughter stared at the wild stallion. The horse hadn't moved, but his gaze was soft, fixed on the small child. "He misses someone," Lindy said with absolute certainty, her voice barely a whisper against the wind. "Like we miss Dad." Ty's name hung in the air, a truth as vast and real as the landscape around them. Amy's heart felt like it was both breaking and healing in the same instant. The tears kept coming, a silent testament to the love and loss she carried. She just watched as Lindy took another small step forward. "She says you love the wild places and that you loved her and me more than anything." Her voice was so pure, so innocent, yet each word carried the weight of years of unspoken longing. Amy choked back a sob, her hand trembling. It was as if her daughter was giving voice to the deepest parts of her own heart, things she hadn't had the strength to say. Then Lindy pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket. "I drew this," she said, carefully unfolding it. It was a crayon drawing of a man with dark hair, a little girl, and a woman with bright hair, all smiling next to a powerful black horse. The colors were vibrant, full of life. "I drew it after Mom told me how Dad helped a horse just like you," Lindy explained. "She said he understood them. He understood them." The stallion took a slow step forward, then another, his ears pricked, his eyes soft. He lowered his head, his nostrils flaring as he gently nudged the paper in Lindy's hand. Amy watched his eyes. They weren't wild or frightened. They were full of a deep, knowing calm, full of memory. Amy finally found her voice, though it was rough with emotion. She talks about him like he never left, she managed to say. She's always asking what he was like. I try to explain, but words are never enough. But now you're here. Her knees felt weak and she sank to the grass, covering her mouth with her hand. What is happening? She whispered. Lindy looked from her mother to the horse. Are you going to stay with us? She asked, her eyes shining with hope. She didn't understand the finality of loss the way her mother did. To her, love meant presence. The stallion didn't answer, of course. He didn't need to. In that moment, he nudged Lindy's shoulder gently, a soft, warm pressure. Amy watched them, her daughter and the horse. The connection in that moment was a warmth she hadn't felt in years. It was something she thought was gone forever. She didn't care if this was all in her head, a grief-fueled fantasy she would never understand. All that mattered was that her daughter was connecting with her father's spirit in a way she never got to in life. Lindy spoke again, her voice full of wonder. I knew you'd find us. I asked the stars to send a message every night. Amy looked up at the endless sky, and for the first time in a long, long while, she didn't feel anger or emptiness. She felt seen, she felt heard, and she felt that maybe, just maybe, Ty had never really left at all. Amy sat in the quiet solitude of the barn, the scent of hay and horses a familiar comfort. Her heart was a tangled mess of confusion and wonder. The encounter with the stallion and Lindy still played over and over in her mind. She had seen him, felt his spirit, heard her daughter speak to him as if he were an old friend. But how? It was just a horse, a wild animal. She had told herself that 100 times. And yet, her fingers traced the carving on an old stall door, place where Ty had once leaned, his laughter echoing in the rafters. The pain of his absence hadn't vanished with time. It had simply woven itself into the fabric of her being. She picked up a worn leather halter from a hook. One Ty had used his hands shaping it, his patience working it. Her own hand shook. The barn looked the same, smelled the same, but the world within her had been irrevocably altered. Amy's eyes filled with tears again. Why now, Ty? She whispered to the empty space. Why show up now? Show up now. When I was finally learning how to breathe on my own. Her voice broke. Survive. That's what she'd been doing. Not truly living. Just pushing through each day for Lindy, a smile pasted on her face. Her tears saved for the lonely nights. Her mind was a whirlwind, flashing back to the cold, sterile silence of the hospital, the finality of a doctor's words. It had shattered her world. And yet, here she was, years later, her heart still aching for him. Seeing that stallion, even for a few moments, had torn open a wound she thought had scarred over. And yet, it had also poured in something else, something warm and bright, something that felt dangerously like hope. Amy walked outside, past the paddocks where the horses watched her with their calm, knowing eyes. She gazed at the rolling hills and endless sky, asking herself again, was it real? Grief plays tricks on the mind. Love makes you see things that aren't there. But Lindy had seen it too. Lindy had felt it, talked to it, and that was the part that twisted Amy's heart the most. If this was just her imagination, why was it shared? Why did it feel more real than anything she had experienced in years? A soft breeze rustled the leaves and she closed her eyes. In her mind, she heard Ty's laugh. Not loud, just a quiet, easy sound. The way he used to laugh when she'd tease him or when they'd watch their daughter sleep. That sound had been absent for far too long. Amy wrapped her arms around herself, letting out a quiet sob. Her shoulders shook, but for once she didn't fight the tears. She let them fall. She remembered Ty's words, spoken late one night under a canopy of stars. No matter what happens, I'll always be a part of this land. A part of you. She had smiled then, thinking it was just a beautiful sentiment. But now it felt like a sacred promise, a promise that was somehow being kept. Amy didn't know what to believe anymore, but she knew what she felt. And in the deepest part of her heart, the part that was broken but also healing, she believed Ty had sent a message. Not forever, but for long enough to remind her that she was still loved, still seen, and never ever alone. The sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the sky in strokes of soft orange and gold. Amy sat on the porch steps, a cold cup of tea forgotten in her hands. Her eyes were weary, her heart overflowing. She didn't hear Jack's quiet footsteps on the wooden planks behind her. He moved with the slow, steady grace of a man in tune with the world. He sat beside her, not speaking at first, just gazing out at the land he loved, a silent, comforting presence. The space between them was not empty. It was filled with a lifetime of unspoken understanding. After a long moment, Jack spoke, his voice low and kind. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said gently. A fragile smile touched Amy's lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I think I have," she whispered. Jack didn't dismiss her. He just nodded. "Sometimes they visit," he said, his gaze distant. "Not in the way we expect, but they find a way." Amy turned to him, her eyes wide with unshed tears. "You believe me?" Jack paused. "I believe in what I see," he said. "And I've seen a love between two people strong enough to echo through time. I've also seen how horses can carry more than just a rider. Sometimes they carry a spirit." Amy blinked hard, fighting a fresh wave of emotion. "It felt so real, Jack. The horse, Lindy saw him too. She talked to him. She talked to him." Jack nodded again, slower this time. "When I lost Marian," he began, his voice thick with memory, "I thought I'd never feel her presence again. But one morning, a hawk landed on the fence post right outside the kitchen window. It just sat there looking at me. It wasn't Marianne. Not really. Not really. But it was a message. It gave me peace." Amy looked at him, surprised. Jack rarely spoke of her mother's death. "Maybe that's what this is," he added softly. "A small visit. A reminder." Amy's lips trembled. "I'm so tired of missing him," she confessed. "I thought I was getting stronger. I thought I was moving on." Jack placed his weathered hand over hers. "You haven't moved on, Amy. You've carried him with you. Every single day. That's not weakness. That's love." His words were a balm to her aching soul. "Grief doesn't just disappear," he continued. "It changes. You learn to walk alongside it." Amy finally met his eyes, her own filled with gratitude. "It just hurts so much." Jack nodded. "I know, but you're not alone in it. You have Lindy. You have Lindy. You have this ranch, and you still have Ty. Maybe not in the way you once did, but in the ways that count." Amy took a shaky breath. The pain was still there, a deep, familiar thrum, but Jack's words had made the burden feel lighter. He wasn't trying to fix her. He was reminding her that she wasn't broken. Jack looked out over the fields again. "You know," he said slowly, "sometimes the ones we love send a sign just to let us know they're all right, and that we're going to be all right too." Amy managed a real smile this time. "You always know what to say," Jack chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. "Not always, but I've been around long enough to learn a thing or two." They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer as the stars began to appear in the twilight sky. Amy didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know if the stallion would return, but Jack's words had settled in her heart. She didn't need proof or answers. She just needed peace. And for the first time in a very long time, she felt its gentle touch. The next morning, the ranch awoke to cool air and a soft blue sky. Amy stood in the stable, the rhythmic motion of brushing Spartan's coat calming her thoughts. The turmoil of yesterday had settled. The pain was still a part of her, but something fundamental had shifted. She turned and saw Lindy standing at the door, holding her riding helmet, her eyes bright with a quiet request. "Can we go for a ride, Mom?" she asked. Amy smiled and nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. I think that's a great idea, dear." They saddled their horses together, Amy moving with practiced ease, Lindy's small, eager hands trying to assist. Soon they were out in the open fields, riding side by side, a gentle wind weaving through their hair. The familiar rhythm of the horses' hooves on the trail was a comforting meditation. Amy let the silence stretch, allowing the sounds of nature to fill the space between them. After a while, Lindy's voice piped up. "Do you think Dad liked riding up here?" Amy glanced at her daughter, her heart swelling. "He loved it," she said. "He said it was the only thing that ever made him feel truly free." Lindy looked up at the vast sky. "I bet he's still riding just way up high now." Amy's eyes welled with tears, but this time they were accompanied by a gentle smile. Her daughter's resilience was a reflection of Ty's own spirit. They reached the crest of a familiar hill, a spot that offered a breathtaking panorama of the ranch and the mountains beyond. Everything looked so peaceful from up there. Lindy pointed towards the sky. "Look, a hawk!" she exclaimed. Amy followed her gaze. A hawk was circling high above them, its wings spread wide as it rode the thermal currents. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Amy felt a warmth bloom in her chest, not the sharp sting of loss, but the gentle glow of love. The feeling of being held without any arms around her. She reached out and took Lindy's hand as they both watched the sky. Maybe that's him, Lindy whispered. Amy didn't answer right away, just watched the bird with a sense of quiet reverence. Maybe it is, she said softly. As they rode back down the trail, Lindy was a chatterbox, telling stories, laughing, asking a stream of questions about horses, about Ty, about life. Amy listened, truly listened. She realized that in the fog of her grief, she had missed this simple, quiet joy. When they returned to the barn, Amy helped Lindy dismount and pulled her into a tight hug. Thank you, she said. Lindy looked up, her head tilted. For what? Amy looked into her daughter's clear eyes. For helping me remember how to smile. Lindy beamed a wide, proud grin. The horse helped too, she said. Amy nodded. Yes, she agreed. I think he did. As they walked towards the house, hand in hand, Amy felt a sensation she hadn't experienced in years. Lightness. Ty's memory was no longer an anchor pulling her down into the depths of sorrow. It was lifting her up.